Story 1. In the fall of 2016, I moved into half of a really old house. It was built in the 1880s, a stone's throw from the original campus of Indiana University, which is now a park filled with homeless people and drug addicts. The owners turned it into a weird duplex. My friend had lived in it right before I moved in, and he claimed that it was haunted, but I didn't believe him because he was a bit of an odd guy. Anyways, the layout of the house was weird. You walked in the door and were in a living room type space, and then you kept walking and there was a doorway to a bedroom, and past that was the kitchen. No doors. The only door inside the apartment was to the bathroom and one that led to the shared basement. So, my first night there was uneventful. I was a little uncomfortable because I hadn't lived by myself for a long time and was just feeling lonely and on edge. I stayed up late and then eventually fell asleep, but I woke up again around 3 in the morning. Cliché, I know. What woke me up was what sounded like a group of drummers drumming on every flat surface of the living room. It went on for a while, and I was completely terrified. It was just a cacophony. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I finally gathered up the balls to get up and check on it, and as soon as I passed the threshold to the living room, it just stopped. Nothing happened the rest of the night, but I didn't get much sleep. A couple of days later, a friend was visiting and he was about to leave. We were standing by the front door next to my bookshelf, and I told him about how I was having trouble sleeping and the story from the first night. As I was saying this, a book threw itself off the bookshelf and onto the floor 3 feet away. It had to fly past the dresser the shelf was perched on and landed between the two of us. He just gave me a creeped out look and said he had to go. I don't blame him. Eventually, I asked the guy in the other half what was up, as he had lived there for 8 years. He told me that no one stayed longer than a year, and they all reported the same shit. For whatever reason, he said nothing ever happened on his side. Doesn't make sense, but there it is. All right, so a lot of what happened was really small stuff. You would just hear stuff shuffling around in the room you weren't in. The light to the shared basement would randomly come on at night, even when the neighbor was traveling. Sometimes I would feel something get into my bed, like a cat, and nothing was there even after I ended up with a pair of cats. I had a lot, and I mean a lot, of nightmares there. That was the bulk of it. But I have 2 more notable stories, and here they are. So the first one isn't that long, but once again, I was woken up sometime in the middle of the night to a loud crashing sound. So, in the living room, there was an old electric organ with about 6 inches of clearance from the wall. I stashed a folding chair as you would buy at IKEA, in between the organ and the wall. The crashing sound was the folding chair being unfolded and slammed into the middle of the room. By this point, I already had the cats, and they were just sitting there staring at it when I came into the room. Second, I will admit, has a conventional explanation that I find much, much scarier than if it were paranormal. So, at some point, I reconnected with an old friend who had moved home from California when his dad got cancer. He ended up living with me, which was not ideal because, as I said earlier, there were no doors, no privacy, but we became close friends. Being poor, we made it work. So he ended up dating this girl who lived about 3 blocks down the road and would often leave and sleep over there. I got him a job where I worked, 9-5, and we would alternate driving to work in the mornings. Anyways, one night he is over at the girl's house spending the night, and I went to bed. Sometime in the night, he came back home and went to the bathroom, which was in my room. Remember, no doors, so he had to walk past my bed to use the toilet. I wake up, he's in there taking a piss, and I can see the light on under the door. When he's done and turns the light off, unusual, and lays down to sleep on the couch like usual. It was winter, and the cats had been escaping and coming back late at night, and one of them had been outside earlier, so I wondered if he had come in with my roommate, and if not, if he would have seen him come home and be waiting at the door. So I decided to get up and check. I got to the door and opened it, but no Luke. I closed the door, and he is sitting right there by my feet with his sister. Okay, I look at the couch. Rumi is already fast asleep as usual. All is good. I go back to sleep. I wake up in the morning and my roomie is gone. I go about my routine and step out to smoke a cigarette while my car warms up. As it gets closer to 9, I begin to debate leaving him to drive himself when I see him come sprinting down the sidewalk. We get in the car and start to work, and I ask him what time he left in the morning to go back for seconds at his girlfriend's place. He said he was there all night, and I about shit my pants. So I know for a fact the door was locked, because the door had some ancient fucking lock design that locked automatically every time you used it. I also know for a fact that my cat was outside, and in the morning he was back in the house. I don't know what to make of it, but it was unsettling. And just for fun, a third story. I said earlier, my house was not far from a park that junkies and the homeless frequented. In the summer of 2017, it was late, and I heard a bunch of noise on my porch, so I went to investigate. There were 2 dudes huddled right by my steps with a flashlight, and I asked them what the fuck they were doing. They replied using English words, but not something I would describe as language. Then they started walking towards that park, through my yard, and the whole time one of them was just calling back to me, "Hey, it's the dark sorry." Story 2. I was 15. My mom was out for the night, and I was home studying. I had my headphones on so I could listen to music while I was working. I guess it was around 9-ish. My pencil rolled off the table. So I bent down to pick it up, and as I did, I looked toward the front door. The doorknob was turning slowly, back and forth. Now, it's an old house, and the doorknob is old, but I know the way it is unlocked from the outside. And with the key in, the knob only turns one way. I moved to the kitchen and called 911, almost eerily calm, and told them my name and address, that I was home alone, and someone was trying to come through my front door. Dispatch stayed on the line with me and said they were routing a helicopter to fly over. Did I have a dog? I did, and she told me to call the dog to the back door and then open the door and bring the dog in, because they were going to use infrared in the backyard. I asked if that was safe. What if he was in the backyard? Her advice was to scream, and she would notify the police on a route that an assault was in progress. Yikes. So I called my poor little Cocker Spaniel to the door and pretty much threw him over my shoulder into the house before slamming and locking the door. Not much good it would do. That door had a single hung window in it. There was a large window next to it and a huge picture window in the living room. If someone wanted in, that deadbolt wasn't stopping much. Once I had the dog in, she told me she was going to hang up and call back in 5 minutes. In that 5 minutes, I was to call the place my mom was and get her to come home. I called. She was playing darts, so I told them to give the phone to her BF, and I told him what was going on. He walked up to where my mom was playing, grabbed her, and walked out of the bar. When the dispatcher called back, she gave me the names, descriptions, and badge numbers of the responding officers, and that she had informed them they were to hold their badges to the front window before the door would be unlocked for them. They showed up, showed me badges, and I opened the door. My mom was less than 5 minutes behind them, which, considering SoCal traffic, means her BF broke several traffic laws to get there. That's when the police showed us the cigarette butts and footprints by the front window and the kitchen window, and the mud scraped off on the top of the gate that separated our front and backyards. He'd been watching me through the windows for quite a while before deciding to break in. Story 3. One night when I was about 12 or 13, my parents were gone for a while, and I was just staying up late, past midnight, on my desktop computer waiting for them to come home. Like most people, I had been told a million times not to talk to strangers on the internet, but about half my friends list on MSN were people I had never met before, so I was just chatting with a bunch of them. Out of nowhere, one of my online friends had told me exactly what I had been doing for the past hour or two. Egg, what I was eating, drinking, playing with when I had gotten up last, things I hadn't mentioned in chat. I instantly got a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. My desktop was set up in front of a big window, so as far as I knew, this person I had been talking to that was supposed to live in a different country than I had found my address and been watching me through the window. Turns out, he had somehow hacked into my webcam. I always left it plugged in, even though I had been warned not to when I wasn't using it, and had been frequently watching me through it whenever he wanted. It's been 10 years, and I still have all the cameras on my devices covered in thick duct tape. Story 4, rented a cheap bi-level duplex in a bad neighborhood for 3.5 years so that I could save up money to buy a house. The first thing I did after unpacking from moving in was bolstered security. I changed the deadbolt on the front door and installed a locking doorknob in place of the crusty, non-locking one that was there. All the windows were old, shitty aluminum slider-style windows with horrible locks, and the back door was a patio door going straight onto a deck, so I bought a hardwood 114 and 204 and cut pieces to put in the window and door tracks so that any potential intruder would have to break a window rather than simply opening one to gain entry. I'm convinced that a past tenant was a drug dealer. In the first 6 months, I had 4 separate instances of tweakers knocking on the door looking for Sam. A couple of the tweakers forlornly stepped off when I told them that nobody named Sam lived there. 2 others got worked up and asked where Sam had gone and where he was living, to which I responded that I had rented the place and had no idea who Sam is. After being visited by the tweakers, I redoubled my efforts to ensure that all doors were locked at all times. I still forgot to lock the front door once in a while, and I had a very creepy experience one night after forgetting to lock it. I was in the middle of cooking dinner one dark evening and went to the washroom. After washing my hands and exiting the washroom, I came back to my kitchen to see a middle-aged Asian man dressed all in black coming up the stairs from the entrance into my kitchen. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, startling him. He said he was there to fix a toilet. I was sure I was going to die, but figured I ought to talk to the guy for a few seconds before lunging for a kitchen knife and fighting for my life. The guy explained that the landlord, Gary, had sent him to fix a toilet. I told him that Gary wasn't my landlord and my toilet was working fine. He asked what address he was at. I gave him my address, and he started profusely apologizing, saying he had the wrong address. He backed down the stairs cautiously, put his boots on, and sheepishly left the duplex. I'm still not sure if he was looking for Sam to square up some unpaid drug debts, and left when he realized that Sam wasn't there if he was looking for a woman to prey on, found me instead, and reconsidered his insidious plan, or if he really was just some poor sap who walked into a stranger's house while on a mission to fix a toilet for Gary, but I never mistakenly left the door at that place unlocked again. Story 5. We had a large, empty bedroom that my parents were always going on about turning into various things, a guest room, a game room, a gym, etc., but never did anything with. It used to be my room before they kicked me out into the closet-sized 3rd bedroom, to never do anything with my old room. But that's by the by. It was always a creepy room, but it was even creepier now that it was empty. Unfortunately, it was right next to my new room, and I had to walk past it every time I wanted to use the bathroom or go downstairs. It had a nasty atmosphere to it, and my mother insisted on keeping the door open so that the air could flow freely around the house, whatever. I'd try to avoid looking at it. I was home alone a lot when I was younger, and this time my parents were both away for around a week or so. Throughout this time, that bedroom had been getting steadily creepier, and one evening I walked past it, and I couldn't help but look. I don't know why. I just looked before I could think about it. It was dark in that room because for some reason the curtains were always closed, and for a moment I couldn't see anything. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I slowly made out a kind of mass in the top left corner of the room. It was huge, filling up the whole corner, and it looked like it was constantly moving. Imagine if someone got a pen and managed to scribble in the air. Just a huge mess of black lines, all tangled together. It looked like that, just hovering there. I stared at it for a moment, and then I felt the most unbelievable sense of dread, and I reached out and closed the door. I didn't open it again until before my parents got back. I didn't mention it to them because I didn't think they'd believe me. The bedroom was eventually turned into a guest room, and wouldn't you know it? Everyone who slept in there had some kind of horrible experience they couldn't explain. Some people reported feeling uneasy or watched all night. Other people reported seeing an old man sitting on a chair in the corner of the room. There was no chair there. My mother, on several occasions, when sleeping in there so she didn't disturb my father getting up early for work, saw the old man in the chair, and also saw him standing inside the mirror, banging his fists against the glass. I had to stay in there once and woke up with red scratch marks down the length of my leg. Story 6. I was home alone with my toddler, getting ready for bed after putting her down for the night when I heard her call for me. So I went to her room and she was fast asleep. Weird. Maybe she had woken up for a moment and then passed out again. Got to the end of the hall before I heard her call for me in a panic. Rushed back in, and she was still asleep in the same position. Sat with her for a few minutes and then made my way to bed when I heard my husband call my name. Must have come home from work early? So I go to him, but he's not there. Call him and confirm he's still at work and decide I must have heard a neighbor or something. Crawl into bed and hear my husband call for me again and then continue talking as if he's having a conversation with someone. Then hear my child calling me again and rush into her room, still asleep. This goes on for a while until I decide I must really need some sleep and go back to bed with the lights on. Too freaked out to sleep. I was staring at a picture hanging on the wall when it disappeared. Like the wall just ate it? Look at another wall hanging, and the same thing happens. They would reappear when I looked away and then be eaten by the wall again when I looked directly at them. Decide I'm officially an insane person and call my husband to come home. Fall asleep eventually and woke up, and everything is normal except my heart rate can't decide on a pace. Swinging up and down between the 30s, 180s. Head into the hospital, and I'm having a hypertensive crisis. Turns out it was the beta blockers I'd started recently. Nobody had heard of that reaction, so they kept me for a couple of days until my numbers stabilized. No hallucinations after the first night other than hearing dogs bark randomly for a couple of days. Story 7. My husband went out of town for his first work trip following the birth of our first child, so it was me, my infant daughter, and the dog at home, and I am counting it as alone, considering I was the only one awake and verbal in the house at the time. I just put my daughter down for bed and was in the kitchen cleaning up when I suddenly heard our garage door open. Something that should not be possible with my husband, and second of 2 garage door openers, literally in another state. I raced to lock the door, coming into the house from the garage and crouched next to it for at least 3 minutes, phone out, and dialed to 911, trying to listen for any sounds of intrusion before cracking the door open, just enough to reach my arm through and close the garage again. I did not sleep super well that night, though some of that can be blamed on the nightmare that was my baby's sleep schedule at the time, and had at least 3 more mysterious garage openings overnight in the following week. It turns out that when I'd paired a spare garage door opener the day prior, one of our neighbors was arriving home and just so happened to use their opener at the exact moment I pressed the link button in our garage. It took me an absurd amount of time to make the connection because they honestly don't go in and out of their house very frequently. In any case, that first instance had me acting out parts of a home intrusion scene in a horror movie. Story 8. When I was about 11 years old, my parents and sister went shopping, and I was staying home with my dog. I was sitting in my room reading a book, with my dog sleeping on the floor, when suddenly the dog woke up and started gnarling at something in the corner of the room. At that time, I was sharing the room with my younger sister. Her bed was located next to that corner, and there were a lot of toys and teddy bears on her bed. Thus, at first, I thought the dog is barking at a teddy bear or something. I grabbed the biggest teddy and gave it to the dog to sniff, telling it to calm down. The dog was not interested in the teddy whatsoever. She kept looking at that corner, gnarling and barking, all her fur ruffled. This was the moment I realized something creepy is going on. The dog started approaching that corner. She attempted it about 3 times, jumping away and screaming with pain each time she got close enough as if something hit her. I've almost shat myself. Yet, I managed to stay calm somehow and started talking in a raised voice. "Whatever you are, leave us alone. I don't want you to scare me anymore." Believe me or not, everything calmed down at that moment. The dog approached that corner once again, this time without screams of pain, and was sniffing it nervously for a longer time, yet there were no traces of anything there. I told my parents about it right away. They came back. I was shaken and told them to never leave me alone there anymore. They've checked that room, but told me the dog must have barked at these toys. I am pretty sure there was something there. That dog was always very calm and never acted that way. Yet this time I think she was able to see, or at least sense, something I wasn't. The underlying sensation was, it was something evil, but I don't know if it's possible to label that. I thought so, because the dog acted as if something was hurting her, not letting it come closer.
Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.